UPSC Prelims 2026 is closer than it looks, दोस्तों. Welcome to day 3 of our Rapid Revision Explainer series. आज हम इस एग्जाम के absolute heart में dive कर रहे हैं, which is modern history. Did you know that over the last 25 years, modern history has consistently dominated the papers with an average of 8 to 12 questions per year? It's literally a game changer. So today, we're moving from the British consolidation straight to the rise of the Mahatma. Grab your pen and paper, let's decode these high-yield trends together.
Here is our game plan for today. We are going to decode the highest frequency topics. We'll start with British administrative traps, then move to economic and land policies, unpack the socio-religious awakening, compare the revolutionaries with the mass movements, and finally decode those tricky PYQ patterns.
All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, British Administrative Traps. Now take a good look at this Constitu timeline. I like to call this the free marks zone. But remember, keep an eye on the earlier British Acts too. The Charter Act of 1813 ended the company's trade monopoly in India, except for tea and trade with China. And by the Charter Act of 1833, the Governor-General of Bengal officially became the Governor-General of India. These acts are your free marks. Literally make a table right now and memorize the main 4 to 5 provisions of each act. Then the timeline shifts dramatically. 1858 brings direct crown rule, 1861 sees nominated Indians, 1909 brings in divisive separate electorates, 1919 introduces that confusing provincial diarchy, and finally, 1935 gives us provincial autonomy. Rat लीजिए इसको. This flow is non-negotiable.
This is where things get absolutely crucial. The 1858 Act completely ended the East India Company's rule. Power went directly to the Crown, handled by a brand new Secretary of State. And for the exam, lock this name in your head. Lord Canning. He became the very first Viceroy of India. The military command was also unified just to make sure another 1857 mutiny wouldn't happen.
Moving on to the 1909 Act, the Morley-Minto Reforms. Examiners absolutely love testing this one. Why? Because it legally kickstarted communalism by bringing in separate electorates for Muslims. But there was another major milestone here. Satyendra Prasad Sinha became the very first Indian to be appointed to the Viceroy's Executive Council as a law member.
Dosto, pay close attention here, because this is a classic examiner trap. In the options, they will inevitably swap the features of the 1919 and 1935 Acts just to confuse you. Remember it like this. 1919 introduced diarchy in the provinces, meaning subjects were divided into transferred and reserved. But the 1935 Act came in, abolished that diarchy, and brought in provincial autonomy. Keep that distinction crystal clear in your mind.
Next up, Section 2, Economic and Land Policies.
Let's talk about the economic traps, a hugely reoccurring theme for prelims. UPSC loves testing these systems. Draw a table of these names and policies right now. Permanent settlement is Lord Cornwallis. The Ryotwari system, remember, was associated with Thomas Munro and Alexander Reed. And here's a pro tip for Lord Wellesley's subsidiary alliance. It was not about securing a fixed income for the company. It was entirely about establishing British paramountcy, maintaining a massive standing army at the expense of Indian states, and creating a strategic buffer against global threats like Napoleon.
Moving to Section 3, the Socio-Religious Awakening.
The 19th century reforms are a recurring goldmine. Don't just casually read about the leaders. Create a table with the leader, organization, place, year, and their books or journals. For instance, Raja Ram Mohan Roy wasn't just a westernizer. He was a brilliant blend of East and West, holding deep respect for traditional philosophical systems while pushing hard for rationalism. Jyotiba Phule Satyashodhak Samaj was a powerful anti-caste movement focused on the upliftment of Dalits in Maharashtra. Also keep an eye on Keshav Chandra Sen, associated with the Indian Reform Association and the Tabernacle of New Dispensation. This mapping is high-yield data.
UPSC loves to check your conceptual clarity on this exact point. In 1866, the Brahmo Samaj actually split. Keshav Chandra Sen broke away and formed the Brahmo Samaj of India, while Debendranath Tagore's more traditional faction became the Adi Brahmo Samaj. Lock that specific split and year into your memory.
That brings us to Section 4, Revolutionaries versus Mass Movements.
Now we pivot to the action phase, how Indians actually responded to these British traps. Think of it as 2 distinct paths to freedom. On one side, you had the radical youth of organizations like the HRA pushing for armed rebellion. On the other side, you had Mahatma Gandhi's strategic mass mobilization, focusing on sustained, nonviolent mass struggle, like the civil disobedience movement.
Talking about the HRA, they famously executed the Kakari train robbery in 1925 to seize government funds for their revolution. This movement evolved quickly, bringing forward iconic figures like Bhagat Singh, who later carried out the assassination of British officer J.P. Saunders to avenge the death of Lala Lajpat Rai. It was a fierce, youth-led pushback.
But let's talk about the man who completely changed the nature of the movement, Mahatma Gandhi. After returning from South Africa in 1915, he didn't jump into politics immediately. He set up his ashram and spent time really understanding India. His ultimate success lies in three crucial local-level struggles. First, Champaran in 1917, against the Tinkatia system, where farmers were forced to grow indigo on 3/20ths of their land. Second, the Ahmedabad Mill Strike in 1918, which was his first hunger strike, fought over the withdrawal of the plague bonus. And third, the Kheda Satyagraha of 1918, a no-tax campaign due to crop failure, which is exactly where Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel joined him as a lifelong follower. These three early wins transformed Gandhi from just a barrister into an absolute mass leader.
While the national leaders were strategizing, the grassroots, the workers and peasants, were also waking up. The AITUC was formed in 1920 with Lala Lajpat Rai as its first president. And here's a fantastic analytical point that examiners love. Subaltern historians argue that peasant uprisings, like the Indigo Revolt, were often highly autonomous. They didn't just sit around waiting for orders from mainstream elite leaders. They organized themselves.
Finally, Section 5, Decoding PYQ Patterns.
To clear the prelims, you absolutely must think like an examiner. For example, UPSC is now asking about the advent of Europeans again. Remember that the Portuguese introduced plants like papaya, pineapple, and guava to India. Understand the New World versus Old World concept. Crops like tobacco and rubber were domesticated in the New World, meaning the Americas, and introduced to the Old World. Also, recall the impact of the Industrial Revolution. By the first half of the 19th century, Indian handicrafts were completely ruined due to British machine-made imports. Now, another classic trap question. Have land reforms in India been a complete success? Whenever you see a word like complete, you need to look beyond the theory and dive into the hard data.
The data tells a very clear story. The objectives of land reforms were noble: remove intermediaries, secure tenant rights, cap land holdings. But the actual outcomes? The success was incredibly relative. They tried to openly dismantle feudalism, sure, but many zamindars just walked away with massive compensation or simply rebranded themselves overnight as self-cultivating farmers.
Yes, there were some successes, like Operation Barga in West Bengal and tenancy reforms in Kerala, but look at the staggering failures. Land ceiling laws were essentially the weakest link. Landlords used massive legal loopholes. They divided up joint family properties, used hidden benami transactions, and sometimes even got formal divorces on paper, all just to retain their massive landholdings.
And here is the ultimate data punchline. Even after all those reforms, today over 56% of rural households remain entirely landless. On the flip side, a tiny 4.9% of farmers control 32% of all farmland. UPSC uses this exact stock data to prove the broader failure of land reforms. Trap mein mat phasna, the policies were far from perfect.
Let's look at one last analytical question regarding local governance. How effective are panchayats today? They were designed to bring democracy to the grassroots, but what's the actual on-ground reality?
Well, the reality is a mixed bag. Politically, they achieved massive success by securing 1/3 reservation for women and proportional seats for SC and ST communities. But economically, the Economic Survey notes that they are stuck in a low equilibrium trap. Local leaders are incredibly reluctant to levy taxes because they fear angering the voters, which means panchayats remain constantly financially dependent on the state and center.
That's it for Day 3. Your modern history strategy is simple. Prioritize high-frequency themes like the national movement and administrative policies over random historical trivia. Check the description below for the Day 3 timeline sheet. Hit like, subscribe, and share, and I'll see you tomorrow for Day 4, where we cover the mass movement phase. Keep revising, dosto.